Hi, Mike. Good
Hi,
evening.
how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am energetic and ready to do this. So, looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's our pleasure that you have accepted our invite, especially at your late evenings. I'm very
Happy to do
privileged.
it. Evenings are easier sometimes, right? The noise of the day is done, and so this is my last thing today.
I'm very privileged to host you. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, guys, those who are watching this webcast, you're with Try Scrum webcast, Humanizing Organizations with Scrum. I have Mike Cohn with me. I think, does he need an introduction? I don't think so, but still, I would go and add a few lines. Mike Cohn is one of the best-selling authors who authored 3 books on Agile, user stories applied for Agile software development, Agile estimation and planning, and succeeding with Agile. I think I would have read these 3 books over and over again, maybe more than 30, 40 times, Mike.
Well, I'm honored. I was a little shocked one year where Amazon had one of my books for sale for Christmas, and it was like a little banner on there, the perfect Christmas present, user stories applied. And I'm like, oh, the poor person that gets that as a present for their birthday or Christmas. So,
Thank you so much. And he's also a founder of Mountain Goat Software. I hope you guys would have visited that website. So his blogs, I think, crossed more than 1 lakh visitors. His tips, weekly tips on Agile. I'm also one of the fans. So I used to
thank you.
visiting his
Thank
website.
you.
Okay, so without any further delay, Mike, I would like to go and understand your perspective. I think you have been in Scrum for about, I'm not sure, 18 years.
I actually ran my first Scrum project in 1995. October 1995 was my first project. I think I was a manager at the time at a company, and what I was doing was working, but it was getting to the point where it probably wasn't going to work. I was doing kind of very traditional management, and things were working, but kind of by brute force and luck, and overtime, things like that. I needed a better way to manage. I went back and read everything I could find on process, including a little book called Wicked Problems, Righteous Solutions, come out in 1990. And it talked about Scrum for hardware and said, wouldn't it be nice if somebody tried this on software? I did. I started applying it. Then I later came across some of the stuff that Jeff Sutherland was writing online about it and started to kind of apply that. And so kind of got lucky and came across it very early on.
Wow. So I think I'm right with the numbers approximately and close to 18 years. I would like to understand your perspective on what is the state of Scrum today, Mike?
Yeah, I think the state of it is that essentially every organization is trying it to some extent. I don't see many organizations that aren't trying it or they have tried it. I'm not sure that they're all being all that successful. I meet a lot of organizations that have struggled with it, normally because they haven't done it in a very committed manner. People will just kind of, try it. It's kind of like, I tried to learn how to play piano one time, but I didn't practice much. And so I don't see companies being all that committed to it any more than they were. So a lot of companies dabbling with it, not necessarily all being successful. I think they could be if they committed, but not a lot of organizations committing fully to what they need to do to make it happen.
Thanks, Mike, for sharing your perspective on the state of Scrum today. And then I have a follow-up question to you. You talked about Scrum is being used in many organizations now than ever. And there is a recent statistic that says more than 20 million people use Scrum, which is very, very big number in my view. So
Wow.
what do you think? What do you think some of the biggest threats to Scrum adoption or growth?
I think one of the biggest is just a worldwide lack of product owners. It's a big challenge in a lot of organizations where many companies will pick kind of an inappropriate person to be their product owner. They'll look around and somebody who is big, important in the organization, but doesn't have time will try to do the job. And that's admirable, but it doesn't work very well if the person has an hour a year to devote to the job. The other thing I'll see is organizations will pick someone who will be great as the product owner, but they're great at 3 other things, and we have the person trying to do 4 jobs. And we're just not in many organizations treating that role with the respect or the availability that it needs. I think a second kind of challenge to adoption is organizations not necessarily taking all of it as seriously as they need to and devoting the resources, getting coaches in to really help a team. The way I view it is like, it's like, come on, it's 2021. We know Scrum works. You just mentioned 20 million people doing it. We know it works, but what we don't know is what successful Scrum looks like in this company. And that's what organizations need to figure out. Is it 1 week sprints, 4 week sprints? Is it 6 week sprints? I hope not. But what does successful Scrum look like here? We got to figure that out. And that's challenging because organizations want to kind of hit the ground running and not have any delays, don't want to have a period where they might be slower. I was talking to somebody this morning and saying that, when you first adopt anything new, you're going to slow down for a little bit. He's like, yeah, for a week or two. I'm like, no, for a couple months, you might be slower. And, he was willing to acknowledge that for 2 weeks, we might be slower. And I'm trying to reset his expectation that more like maybe for 2 months, there might be some serious inefficiencies. And it could be longer than that in some organizations. And if you go into it with an attitude that, yeah, I'll invest 2 weeks in getting better, you're probably not going to be successful.
Yeah, that's a nice perspective. Product owner role is a very, very crucial role in getting Scrum adoption well. Okay, so interesting view, Mike. I would like to ask you then, what's the next big thing coming with the Scrum framework? So because you talked about it's 2021 almost, many people realize Scrum is really working. In your view, what's the next big thing is coming?
I get asked that a lot, and I don't know if there is a next big thing coming. Scrum's a framework, and what I think we're going to see is just a lot of incremental little improvements to it. As an example, I've been doing this a long enough that I remember when retrospectives were not a part of Scrum. And when they were added into Scrum and kind of officially a part of Scrum, and teams worldwide started to add retrospectives into what they did, even that wasn't viewed as, oh no, it's monumental, it's a massive change to Scrum. It was just this incremental improvement. And that was so because some teams had been doing retrospectives for a while. And so it wasn't that earth shattering. And so I think the whole framework is built on the idea of continual improvement, looking at things, making them a little bit better. And I think that's what we're going to see. So I'm not really one of those that are out there looking for what's the big jolt that's going to make us 2 or 3 or people look for being 10 times better than we are today. I'm not sure that's going to happen. A guy named Fred Brooks wrote a paper called No Silver Bullet, probably 40 years ago now, saying that there is nothing out there that's going to magically make teams 10 times better than they were. And he was arguing back then, and this is kind of pre-Agile, that there is no silver bullet. We're just going to be continually getting a little better, and we're going to get great. I look at teams today, 2021, that are just kind of middle of the road Agile teams. I mean, they're not like award-winning Agile teams, just like a good Agile team, but not great, just good. And they are so much better than a team that I remember working with in the mid 90s, right? And that team in the 90s was like, they were as good as it could be. They were wonderful. And today they're not even as good as just kind of a middle of the road Agile team. And that's because of all the little continual improvements that we found. So I think it's going to be more the buildup of small things rather than something big and earth shattering. And we're going to look at it and go, wow, that was really the big change to Agile.
Wow. So we are on the right time then. 9 and maybe 8 in 10 executives that we have been talking to, Mike, they started calling, we need to scale. Scrum isn't enough for us, right? So I'm going to ask you a next follow-up question. So we are hearing a lot about scaling frameworks. Everybody wants to scale. So what's your view on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if everybody wants to scale. What I think it is all the consultants want to sell scaling frameworks. And I think that's what drives that. I know so many consultants that looked at it and it was like, I can go to that company and help 2 teams, or I can go to that company and help 100 teams. I'm going to go help the company with 100. I bet I make more money. And so I don't know, I'm a little cynical with that, but I'm just not that interested in the scaling frameworks. I'm much more interested. I enjoy working with kind of small and medium-sized companies, and I work with some big companies, and it's like, wow, I bet they're not going to be successful with this. And and then I tend to not work with a company if I don't think they're going to be successful. It's just like a waste of my time, a waste of their money. And some of the big ones, it's just really hard. I was with a really large company, and they were just bringing Agile into a small group, a couple 100,000 people. And they weren't all on one project. So it wasn't this like massive scaling thing, but it was fairly broad in terms of the number of people. And they had a fire drill, literally had a fire drill. One of the days I was there, we go out and the fire drill was super efficient. It was, it was done in like 15 minutes, but I'm standing out there during this fire drill doing the math on how much money a fire drill costs for, there were 400,000 employees and they said they do it twice a year. And so I do the math on 400,000 employees twice a year, 15 minutes. And then I start thinking about, I don't remember what the math was, but it was like a couple hundred people. It's like, I start thinking of my clients that are smaller than this company loses in fire drills. Right. And, the little efficiencies add up, and I don't get that excited about trying to go into a 400,000 person company, making them all agile. What I get interested in is the I don't care what the size of the organization, it could be the 400,000, but getting management to do it, right? If you can get the leadership group to do it, and then it starts to become part of the company culture, I think that's the way to scale much more than, oh, let me go in and I'll coach your 1,000 teams. I'm not into that. Not my thing. I know a lot of people that are, and I think there's a lot of value in the scaling frameworks if we treat them in a kind of lightweight way and don't get addicted to them and think we have to do everything they prescribe.
I think that's a very good perspective, Mike. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this webcast might get benefited from this perspective.
Good.
Right. So your advice to organizations, right, that are scaling fast from day one. Your simple advice to organizations.
It would be to scale slowly. It's a little bit back to the idea of we need to figure out what Agile looks like in this company. And Kent Beck, the inventor of extreme programming, had a great analogy many years ago. He talked about 3 ways of transitioning to Agile. And he used the metaphor of getting into a swimming pool. And he said, there's 3 ways to get into a swimming pool. There are the toe dippers, right? You dip a foot in, take it out, dip a foot in a little bit deeper, right? And you're kind of getting used to the swimming pool. Then he said, there's the racing start, and the racing start is, you plan it all out and you go for it. And then he said, there's the cannonball, right? You just kind of jump in, make a big splash. And I think that's what a lot of if we try to go scaling too fast, it's kind of like the cannonball. We're just going to make a big mess. We're going to get there pretty quickly, but we're going to create a lot of disruption while we try it. And so what I like is a little bit more of that. I like a little bit kind of a combination of the toe dipping and the racing start. I want to start pretty slow and experiment. I don't know, it could be 40 teams, but small for that organization, whatever it would be, and run some experiments. Try 1-week sprints, try 4-week sprints, try having a scrum master on 2 teams, try having a dedicated scrum master, and then share the experiences. So make the mistakes when they're less costly. They're not as costly if you have 5 teams and you're going to go to 100. They're less costly if you have 40 teams. That's a big number of teams, but they're not very costly if you have 40 teams and you're going to go to 1,000 teams. And so start small rather than rush to it. Once you get it figured out, once you've done it for a little bit, it could be 3 months, then go for the racing start. But I don't want to go big on the scaling from day one. I want to start small, figure it out, run some pilots, then commit to it and go for it.
Thank you so much. And so I'm going to ask you one important question now. I think many people would be looking up to you to hear from your perspective. What makes an organization truly agile?
That's an interesting question. I think true agility for me is kind of our attitude towards change. How do we feel about it when a change comes into our industry? And of course, we want to respond to it, things like that. But what's our attitude when change occurs? And I can just be totally honest with you. This is a hard one for me. I'm very agile, but I have to work at it because my attitude towards change is normally like pissed off, right? I get angry that something changed. And I mean, this is a sad example, but I was on an airplane and I boarded, I'm on like row 18 or something, right? But I got an aisle seat. I'm kind of happy. And I've got a lot of miles on some of the airlines. So they upgraded me. They moved me to business class. And my first reaction was like, darn, my suitcase is stuck back here in coach, right? What type of jerk gets mad about being upgraded to business class a couple of times a year, right? And it was like, this is a good thing. So I struggle with embracing change, right? And that was a subtitle of Kent Beck, who I mentioned earlier. Subtitle of his book is Embrace Change. And I think our attitude towards change reveals a lot about how agile we are. And some of the companies, there's not a lot of these, but a few companies I've worked with have actually got to the point where they're not just embracing change, they're the ones creating the change in their industry. And that is super powerful because now others have to respond to them, right? And they're the ones that have gone from being maybe a market follower to a market leader where they're the ones innovating. They're the ones coming out with new ideas that people have to figure out, how do we compete with this? And wow, that's really powerful. You're no longer responding, you're creating. And it's that attitude towards change. And when we change things, there's going to be times where we fail. How do we feel about that if we fail? Do we look at it and go, okay, I learned something, so it's frustrating. It's never fun to fail. But did we learn enough that it was worth it and we move forward? Or do we get mad and yell at people? And then we get this kind of culture that doesn't want to try things. They don't want to gamble. They don't want to try to improve. So for me, it's really all about that attitude to change. If we have the right attitude to change, I think we do the rest of the things that we need to do to really become agile.
Wow. So you didn't talk about scaling frameworks. You didn't talk about methodologies. You didn't talk about a lot of practices, right? So you talked about the right attitude and behavior.
I think it's mindset. I think it comes down to mindset. And one of the things I remember from the early Agile conferences, the ones that were going on in the early 2000s, every year I'd go to these conferences and there'd be some conversation that happened at lunch, typically at lunch. And it had to do with the old movie Karate Kid. I don't know if you remember that movie, right? But the kid learns to do karate by waxing the guy's car, right? And so the conversation was, can you learn Agile? Can you be agile if you don't know why you're doing it, but you just go through the motions, right? You just wax the car, right? And you do a lot of automated testing, you do pair programming, you got no idea why you're doing it, but you just go through the motions. Do you wake up one morning and you're agile? And the argument against that was other people are, no, you got to start with the principles, got to know why you're doing everything. And then once you know why, you can learn their practices after. And there were these raging debates every year. And it was like kind of like the same people, a few new faces, but every year we would debate about that. And for me, it was always about the principles. You have to know why you're doing something. Otherwise, I think part of it is just our developer personality is like, a lot of developers in Agile. And if we don't know why, we're going to resist, right? The boss says, wax the car. It's like, screw you, boss, right? I need to know why. You give me a good reason to wax the car. I'll do it all day. But if there's not a reason, we don't want to do it. So I think it's that start with principles, that mindset. And that to me, why it's about our mindset and response to change when it occurs, when it inevitably occurs.
Intriguing, Mike, intriguing. So I think we talked about what makes an organization truly agile. I think, again, there is a famous survey that says we are going to cross 1 billion people, intelligent workers soon. So a lot of people might probably need, they need to understand what truly agile means to them in their organization, especially, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah. I would like to hear your advice. And one advice would you like to give it to people that are starting to learn Scrum, especially?
Well, I think it's to not get too caught up in the practices, kind of what I was describing, right? I'm known for talking about user stories. I'm known for talking about story points, two things that I spend a lot of my time discussing and helping organizations with. Those are not the right starting point, right? Those are things that you add on, they're fine tunings. And I think about somebody starting out into their career and they want to learn Scrum, perhaps be a Scrum master, focus on what the principles are. And, the principles of like, get together and plan what you're going to do in a short period of time. At the end of the period of time, talk about how well you did it so you can learn. Talk about ways to get better at it. Communicate a lot during the period. I don't know that I missed anything. I might have just described Agile in like 40 words there, but it's like focus on those things. I get this a lot where somebody will come to me and say, how can we do Agile in this hardware environment? How can we do Agile in this mechanical engineering environment? How can we Agile in marketing? And to me, it's always about going back to these principles. And whether you use story points or user stories, two things that basically pay my bills, I don't care, right? Those are optimizations that are great for certain teams, but not for all teams. And I always think of Scrum as being this, in Agile as well, but just kind of being this small set of rules, or not even rules, but the principles that we have to follow. And then around those rules, I think about this kind of like concentric circles, around there are really good ideas. And I'm going to put things like user stories and story points and retrospective techniques, all those in that universe of really good ideas. And I think a good Scrum Master has to know those. And then beyond there is just like all sorts of ideas that people are experimenting with out there that you and I don't even know about, right? But there's, some team in Kiev trying something out now, and they're going to tell 10 other teams, and you and I are going to hear about it a year and a half from now. And maybe it works for us, maybe it doesn't, but it's a good idea for us. Maybe it's only 10% of teams. So there's the core principles. There's kind of these good practices that everybody should at least know. I should know what a user story is, may not do them. And then there's this whole other universe out there, that things that people are experimenting with. And so when somebody's starting, I want to just kind of focus on the principles. Maybe it's like, learning to play the scales when you're learning to play a piano. Just focus on the principles. Do that long enough, you'll start to the things beyond it will make sense. But you don't have to get too involved with thousands of things to learn. Just focus on the principles and apply that to what you're doing.
Thank you, Mike. I think my personal question from your previous response, you talked about Scrum Master role. I get this question from many people that I encounter, right? So I thought I can add this question to you and get your perspective. Is it worth it to be a Scrum Master?
Oh man, absolutely. I love being a Scrum Master, and here's what I think happened with Agile. We had a role called project manager, still do, right? We have this role called project manager. And I look back on being a project manager, all the thousands of project managers that I've met. It's a tough job. They're asked to get something done, make this happen, but they're not really given full authority over their product normally. They don't really have the ability, we can't do that. We're going to drop that requirement. They normally don't have that. And so in Scrum, we kind of take that project manager role, we blow it up, and we end up with somebody who's a product owner, and their job is to figure out what to build and in what order. And then we have another role of a Scrum Master, and the Scrum Master's job is to basically make the team as efficient as possible at building whatever the product owner says we need. And so they're about just kind of the collaboration stuff. And so the way I think about this is Scrum Masters don't care what we're building, right? Really doesn't matter to me what I'm building. What I love, what really gets me excited, is the creative act of building something. And I mean, here's an example. One of my clients makes toilet seats. I loved working with them. I'm not working with them currently, a few years ago, but I loved working with them. If you can get excited about making toilet seats, you can get excited about pretty much anything. And I've worked with some really cool companies, right? All sorts of, name the cool company. I've probably done some work with them, and they're fun too. But honestly, I don't know that they're any more fun than the toilet seat company was. I really don't care what we're making. And I think there's a lot of us that are in that boat. And, sure, some things are more fun than others, but some of us like the creative act, and we like getting the best out of a team. And I don't know, was it a healthcare app, a financial services app, or a game, or a toilet seat? Doesn't really matter to me. It was fun getting a team to be the best they could be in doing that. Other people, man, the creative act, that's ugly. I don't want to be involved in that. I just want the end product, right? And those are product owners. And so I love the split that we made there, because it lets people focus on the part of the job they love. And most of us don't really like both parts equally, right? We love the creative act, or we love the end result. I like the split that creates. So I think being a Scrum Master is a fantastic job. I think it's fun. I think it's a really good career move for people. People go into being a Scrum Master and they learn how to get the best out of people, often without having direct authority over the person. What that means is when that person gets promoted, let's say they get promoted to development director, well, they're a great development director because they know how to get their developers to do things without saying, do it because I'm the boss. Nobody wants to do it because I'm the boss. That's a horrible motivation technique. But if we have a Scrum Master who's learned how to lead with influence rather than direct authority, they make great bosses as they move up. So I think it's a great career move. I think it's a fun job. You can tell I'm excited about it. I like being a Scrum Master. When I get to do it, when I'm doing that, it's just absolutely good thing to do.
I totally agree with you, Mike. I love being a Scrum Master. Yes. Yeah.
It's fun.
So,
it's fun.
It was a nice perspective, Mike. And one last question about Mountain Goat software. So
what about it?
Yeah. So tell us about Mountain Goat software. I know people used to frequently visit, especially
Yeah.
I'm one of the fans, a lot of writings for Scrum Masters, product owners, and Agile.
Yeah. Well, a fun story about Mountain Goat is the name. How did we get the name Mountain Goat Software? I had read a book by a guy named Tom Gilb, Gilb, Tom Gilb, and a Norwegian guy. And he wrote a book called Principles of Software Engineering Management back in 1989. And I read it like the year after it came out. In there, he has different principles. One's the Norwegian skier principle, which says get up if you fall down or something like that. And one of his principles is the mountain goat principle, which says make sure each hoof is firmly planted as you climb step by step up the rocky hillside. And so it was about well tested, firmly planted hooves meant well tested. Step by step climbing the mountain meant iterations. And so Tom, back in 1989, really wrote the first Agile book. And I consider him the very first Agilist. Back then, he was talking about build projects with 50 iterations. Now, he was mostly talking about year-long projects. And so he was kind of describing week-long iterations. First guy to really be doing that. And it was a huge influence on me. So that was how we got the name. And what we do is a lot of training, coaching. I do a lot of blogging. I send a weekly tip, just a really short little weekly tip that only goes out to subscribers. Anybody can subscribe. It's no fee, but I only send it to subscribers. And just do a lot of video training, in-person stuff. But our whole thing is about really trying to help good teams become great teams. That's our focus.
Wow. So I'm one of the fans who used to frequently visit your website. One secret question to you is, how do you find time to write a lot of blogs? I see your blogs coming up over and over again. So one secret tip for us?
I use Agile to manage my time. I literally do 1 week sprints. I tend to plan on Sundays, and so on Sunday, kind of the weekend, I'll make my plan for the week, my product backlog or sprint backlog. What is it I want to get done during the week? And the one thing that I'm doing that's starting to be a little bit different from Scrum or from Agile in general, and I'm really wondering about this, is I'm finding I'm having a hard time if I just start the week, because I'm just getting busier and busier. And I have a hard time if I just say, okay, my most important thing this week is to write a blog post, write 2 emails, and do some podcasts or something like that. And what happens, I get interrupted. The whirlwind of activity takes over. And so I've been doing a little bit more lately with putting those things on my calendar, right? And saying, okay, not just most important thing, my backlog, write a blog post, but that's going to happen on Tuesday between 10 and 1, something like that. And so starting to kind of wonder what that means about it, because if I'm not having a lot of success anymore, I did it for years, but less so these days, with just a sprint backlog, focus on the top priority things. Maybe teams need to do a little bit more of that, where they're like, okay, this backlog is going to happen on Tuesday. We got to get this one done on Monday. Haven't done that much with a few teams. I do have a few teams I'm working with that are experimenting with that, but I don't know. It's coming out of my struggle to always get as much done when I just, okay, here's my top 5 things for the week. They don't always happen. So if I put them in a calendar, they happen.
Well, so many thanks, Mike. We don't know what are the background things going on really, but we really enjoy to read your writings. Please continue to send them to us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So that's all I had for today, Mike. I would like to thank you so much for your time, especially in your late evening. It was quite intriguing, and also I really felt there are a lot of insights that I got from this interview. I look forward to hosting you once again. Thank you once again for your time, and see you soon.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.